Tonight, a government rethink on WASPI women, with ministers saying they will reconsider a decision not to award compensation. The Work and Pension Secretary tells MPs that new evidence has come to light, giving fresh hope to more than 3 million women who were affected by the rise in the state pension age. But it isn't also giving false hope. Also tonight, crisis. What crisis? The outgoing BBC Director General and the Culture Secretary defend the corporation despite the threat of $1 billion lawsuit from Donald Trump. An apology from the Justice Secretary facing MPs for the first time since the mistaken release of 2 prisoners, but an admission that 3 additional offenders are still at large. And a group of MPs call for the release of 15 penguins at London's aquarium, saying that the conditions they're being kept in are un-British. We'll be discussing that. Well, no escape for our duo tonight, Nick Ferrari and Luke Sullivan, who are trapped with me for the next hour. It's Tuesday, I'm Darren McCaffrey, live from Westminster, and this is the Politics Hub. A very good evening, and tonight we begin with what seems on the surface at least a significant breaking news story. That is that the government has announced in the Commons this afternoon that they're going to reconsider the decision not to give compensation to so-called WASPI women. Now, those are the 3.6 million women born in the 1950s who saw their pension age increase in line with that of men. Here is what the Work and Pension Secretary, Pat McFadden, had to say a little earlier.
Had this report been provided to my right honourable friend, she would of course have considered it alongside all other relevant evidence and material. Mr Speaker, in light of this, and in the interests of fairness and transparency, I have concluded that the Government should now consider this evidence. This means we will retake the decision made last December as it relates to the communications on state pension age.
Now, if this was a genuine reconsideration, it would, of course, be huge for those millions of campaigners, those women who feel like they've been disadvantaged, and huge, of course, for the government too, given that the bill could be north of 10 billion quid. But if you actually listen to Pat McFadden clearly, he seems to be suggesting actually this reconsideration might not change the actual decision at all. Instead, it seems that this is a government which missed out on some consulting documents in the original decision-making processing, now having to look at it again ahead of a potentially bruising High Court legal challenge, which is due to begin next month. Now, that not only poses questions, yet again, about competence inside government, but it will also ignite a massively controversial issue, again, ahead of the budget, and it possibly may raise the hopes of those women. And it may ultimately be for nothing. Not ideal, it must be said, at a time in which this government is struggling to retain the support, particularly of pensioners. So is this a false hope? Let's bring in our chief political correspondent, John Craig, who is in Parliament tonight in Central Upby. And John, what's your sense of what Pat McFadden had to say this afternoon?
Well, I've been talking to one of the senior campaigners on behalf of those WASPI women. That's the veteran Tory MP, Sir John Hayes. And he is confident that this is a breakthrough because he believes that if the reason the government's done this is because of that court battle you referred to a moment ago, and the government clearly feared it was going to lose. Now, just to explain who's affected by this, it's basically women born in the 50s, and it all goes back to the raising of the pension age from 60 to 65 for women, and then from 6 to 66 for men and women. Now, what Mr McFadden said in a statement that was a surprise statement, really, we knew we were going to get a statement on prisons and the BBC, and then that one was slipped in between. Mr McFadden referred to an ombudsman report, which the government rejected in December. It was December when the previous Work and Pensions Secretary, Liz Kendall, said, no, can't afford it. The Prime Minister said the same thing at Prime Minister's Questions. When Liz Kendall said that, there were shouts of shame in the House of Commons. And of course, all the campaigners were furious. Now, what's happened now is that, as Mr McFadden said, as part of the legal proceedings challenging the government's decision, evidence had been cited about research findings from a 2007 report. It was an evaluation of something called the Automatic Pension Forecast Letters, dreadful DWP jargon. And as we've just heard from Mr McFadden, he said, of course, had Liz Kendall had that information, she would have considered it along with other material. So there is optimism. I think you're being perhaps a bit cynical, perhaps a bit churlish in saying that this is all a ruse to try and get a better outcome in court. But certainly there is optimism here from campaigners. It's a big U-turn, comes after winter fuel payments, welfare reform and so on. And don't underestimate the anger that there was when the government said last year it couldn't afford this, because this was something that Labour campaigned on in opposition and promised. It was a wrong that they promised to right, and they promised that they would provide this compensation. Then in government they said we can't afford it. Well, it certainly opened the door to compensation and a big U-turn, and it has raised hopes, certainly, although the government is trying to play down those hopes tonight, saying, well, just because we're looking at it again doesn't necessarily mean we're going to cough up. But of course, if they lose the battle in the courts, they may well have to cough up. What is potentially quite a bruising battle is due to start in the courts next month, and probably a week or so after the budget. And so this is a big, very significant development. It's a big U-turn. It's had a pretty good welcome here, but as you say, they haven't actually signed the cheque yet.
Indeed, they have not. John, always a pleasure. Thank you very much indeed. John Craig there for us live in Parliament. Let's bring in Debbie Dusson, who is a Director of Communications for that WASPI Women campaign and herself has been affected by this decision. Debbie, a very good evening to you. What's your sense of the significance of today?
Well, it was surprising. We started the day with a rumour of a statement, not knowing what it would be, and we've ended the day with the government carrying out this extraordinary change of heart. We've been campaigning for 10 years, and the government have used every means to defend their position all the way along. And so today's announcement is a huge step forward for WASPI. We're at the stage where we would have been if we'd won our judicial review. Nobody in the campaign is under any illusion that if we'd won the judicial review, it would automatically mean that WASPI women would get compensation. But we were always adamant that if the government made a decision, they should be made for legal reasons, and we weren't convinced that they had been made for those reasons, and that seems now to be the case. So we're very pleased, and we welcome.
What's your sense of what forced this kind of rethink from the government? What's your understanding of what has gone on here?
Well, clearly, some vital evidence wasn't shown to the minister, and on that basis, she made her decision. And so that's something that they very seriously need to go back and look at. As far as we're concerned, it's not new evidence, but it's evidence that wasn't put before her. So that was remiss, and that needs to be put right. So that's obviously what the government are going to do. They're going to look at all the evidence together and hopefully come to a different conclusion as far as WASPI women are concerned.
As you say, a large number of women have been affected by this. I think 3.6 million is the number. What impact has it had for those that have not been affected?
For women who have been affected, the impact has been enormous, because by the time they found out, the WASPI issue is all about the lack of notice we received. It's not about the increase to the state pension age. We're not complaining about that. We're campaigning about the fact that we weren't given adequate notice. And for the women who weren't given adequate notice, many of them had already given up work when they found out that they weren't going to receive their state pension for up to 6 years. And they had already taken crucial decisions about their retirement and were giving up work to look after elderly parents or relatives. And getting back into work under those circumstances at that age is extremely difficult. So we know that women have suffered and are still suffering now. And this is just one more misstep by the government on a long road to seeking compensation for WASPI women.
And Debbie, does that include you in terms of a sense that you feel that you didn't see this coming either, and what impact it's had on you personally?
Absolutely, the lack of notice and the lack of opportunity to get back into work, the lack of opportunity to catch up with technology that had come in since I was in the workplace, and for many other women, similar difficulties, just getting back into work or keeping on doing the jobs that they were doing, if they were in nursing or jobs where they had to stand on their feet all day. The prospect of working for another 6 years when you didn't expect it has been enormous. So I'm like 3.6 million other WASPI women who've all been impacted by this problem.
OK, Debbie, we appreciate your time this evening. Join us there from the campaign that has been going at this for quite a long time, because we should say this decision has predated, of course, the current government. Let's bring in the studio, though, the Work and Pension spokesperson for the SNP. That's Kirsty Blackman, who is with us. A very good evening to you. Now, we've been talking tonight about documents that apparently the previous Work and Pension Secretary, Liz Kendall, didn't see. I believe you know, essentially, what these documents are, is that right?
Yes, I've been in contact with some WASPI women, some former colleagues have been in contact with some WASPI women and got hold of these documents. So this document, there was a survey from 2006 that was done by Nat Sen, had a look at the percentage of people that understood about pensions. So they've said that the age group that we're looking at, the ones that were to become WASPI women, around 53% of men in that age group felt they had a good or reasonable knowledge of pensions and pensions issues, but only 27% of women felt that they knew that at that time.
Just to say, we've got that kind of piece of paper or that bit of the document behind you there in terms of the survey results. So the bottom line is that women were less aware, because we're getting to the crux of the argument here, is that the argument is they did not see this coming. Absolutely,
they didn't see this coming. And this is apparently the document that the Secretary of State did not have at the time. Unfortunately, and I've only just learned this, or I would have told you it before, the Secretary of State quoted it in her statement that she made in December 2024. Okay. She quoted this document that she apparently didn't have, that is now come to light. So I have no idea how she could possibly have quoted a document that she didn't have in order to make the wrong decision.
So this is, I mean, you know, it's quite confusing. What do you think is going on here?
It's complete and total chaos. I think the government is trying to get out of having to lose this court case. I think the government is trying to get away from that potential situation. I think also, I don't know if they're going to change their mind on compensation for WASPI women. I will continue to push for compensation to WASPI women. That's always been the SNP policy. We put a bill through in the Commons asking for just that earlier this year. However, if they're not going to change their mind, if they're going to look at all of this evidence and leave people in this limbo again, we at least need some level of timelines. But when actually are they going to tell us? When are they going to be able to review all the evidence?
What impact will this now have the court case? The court case essentially is put on hold as well.
I mean, I'm not a lawyer, so I can't answer you on exactly what this will do for the court case, but I think it just shows the level of complete and total chaos that the UK government are in. How did they not find this document that they quoted during the actual announcement in December 2024.
It does seem quite extraordinary. Just on the figure, though, as you say, you've been pushing for this conversation, it's £10.5 billion. I mean, this country, the one thing we do definitely know about this country, aside from the fact that government seem to be incompetent in lots of different areas, is that we haven't got much money. What's the argument around this, particularly when there's a lot of focus on the fact that, on the whole, pensioners have done quite well in recent decades?
I mean, not so much female pensioners. Actually, if you look at the fact that across their lifetimes, they've been paid less than men. They've had to quit work when they had children or got married. They've not been able to get promoted in the same way as their male colleagues. I don't think it's fair for any government of any colour to ask these women who have worked incredibly hard to forego money because the government doesn't have it. It's not the WASPI women's fault that the government has got less money than it would like to at this moment in time. They're the ones that have worked so hard and been, they've been done wrong. Wrong has been done to them. The PHSO found that, but the government's refused to provide compensation.
OK, Kirsty, appreciate your time trying to get to the bottom of all this. Thank you very much indeed, Kirsty Blackman there from the SNP. And of course, this is going to feature undoubtedly in tomorrow's papers. And we've got our extended press preview from 10:30 this evening with tonight's news and tomorrow's headlines. Joining us tonight will be the journalist broadcaster Sonia Soda and the broadcaster and commentator Ali Mirage. That's from 10:30 here on Sky News. Right, gentlemen, very good evening to you.
Good evening.
Nick Ferrari is with me, of course, LBC broadcaster, and Keir Starmer's former political director, Luke Sullivan. Who wants to go first?
Well, I've just been listening. I want to go first. I've just been listening to Kirsty. Great work. This is like Traitors, isn't it? We need Alan Carr and Joe Marler. How, as Kirsty said, how come they were quoting from something that they hadn't seen? All I would say here is, if the government is going to put this right, credit to them. This is a wrong that has need to be righted for a considerable amount of time. By the very nature, sadly, we lose some of these women each year because of the age. They have had so many promises before from governments of all different colours. If these are the people to put it right, let's put it right. But it comes as a cost.
It comes at a huge cost,
as you worked out. But it is a wrong that has to be put right.
Luke, what's your sense?
I mean, I think there's no denying when you heard the previous contributor talk about the stress and strain that has gone through these women who have had this. And I think, as Nick makes the point, a lot of politicians, both in opposition and government, have made promises to them. I think my suspicion here is that this is probably a process question. The government are trying to get their ducks in a row, ensure that they're legally watertight, and
that was my sense. I mean, given the fact that they seem almost certainly to be scrabbling around for money when it comes to the two-child benefit stuff, which, by the way, is a fraction of what this would cost.
Yeah.
I mean,
and I think that's my fit. I completely accept the point about, the promises being made. This is really unsettling to a huge group of, female pensioners. However, my actual fear here is that the government needs to be clear what the timetable is. But my suspicion is they're going to make the decision that they've already made, and this is about making it legally watertight. And I think, sadly, the fact of the matter is, if the government had £10.5 billion to spend, that they wouldn't be spending it in this way. And, I think they've made their decision.
And Nick, and this is the problem, is that we're now talking about all of this. There'll be people watching this hoping, obviously, it is reconsidered.
Yep.
And if it isn't, it'll all go back to what was the point of all that? And at the time when it seems... And we'll see what Liz Kendall knew at the time or whatever. It comes back to competence within government.
Well, and Luke can speak more to this than I can, but I think if you were to march this band of women up to the top of the hill again and then march them back, the repercussions... But not just them, Darren, with respect. I think the general electorate would say, hang on, this is a bunch of women who are reaching a certain age, they've been very poorly treated, you gave them this extraordinary hope. To turn back on it now, the damage is potentially huge, right?
I think so, and there's no denying. I think you could hear in Pat McFadden's statement, he's wanted to get the facts out as quickly as possible. I think what people want is certainty, and I think where this is no doubt headed is to the courts, I'm afraid.
Is it terrible to say that it seems that normally what happens when government ministers take over government departments, they kind of see what the state the opposition has left it in. It seems increasingly inside this Labour government, they're looking at government departments and seeing what the incompetence that the previous Labour cabinet minister left.
I don't think that's fair, because my recollection...
Well, David Lammy can't be very happy tonight either.
My recollection on WASPI women, there are a number of issues crashing into one another here, but, as Kirsty Blackman just said, the PHSO, the Parliamentary Ombudsman investigation finding was a good nearly year before the general election, and this was part of a decision that the Tories just left. They didn't want to touch it. They knew what they were going to do. Didn't want to annoy a huge group of voters, as Nick has just said. And frankly, look, it's a really tough decision. But
as John Craig said, you guys did.
Yes, and I think, to Nick's point, a series of politicians have made pledges, and actually, I think what was refreshing from Pat today, and I thought we saw this last December from Liz, was making a decision to try and put people, look, they might not like the decision. There's loads of reasons why people might not like the decision, but people need certainty and closure on what this position is, because this is, you know, it dragged on far too long, like too many issues happen in politics.
But just very finally on this, Nick, the problem is it's going to now drag on yet again.
It is going to drag on. The government would do well.
Because we don't even know where, I mean, as we're not lawyers, so we don't even know where this court case that was due to start in a couple of weeks is going to be.
No, and lawyers like nothing more, of course, than dragging things out, as we might be about to see from a president across the water. But this is a constituency that deserve to be treated well. So let's hope that this government sees that should be done, because they deserve it. There's no question about it. They've been treated appallingly.
Well, we will continue to work through it, and we'll have continuing coverage, of course, this evening here on Sky News. For the moment, Nick and Luke, thank you very much indeed. This is the Politics Up. Up next, crisis at the BBC, as the outgoing Director General tells staff they are paying for their mistakes, but they also must fight for their journalism. We'll be talking about the BBC after the break. Stay tuned.
She was beautiful, she was bright, she had so much potential.
This wasn't an accident. Those individuals that didn't do their job properly, as far as I'm concerned, Nick, they need to be in a dock.
I don't know why a local authority would be trying so hard to avoid scrutiny.
Is cover-up too strong?
I don't think it is. The evidence is there. Nanita should never have died.
Just got so many questions, and I'm not the only one.
What might happen if Russia attacked the UK?
This is clearly an enormous show of force. It is definitely out of the ordinary.
We ran a war game with former ministers back in the hot seat.
Ben Wallace.
Amber Rudd.
Jack Straw.
It's the kind of war game that's genuinely tested inside government.
The Russians are signalling that there may be an attack.
Russia knows our weaknesses, but do you? I'm Deborah Haynes. From Sky News and Tortoise, this is The War Game. Listen wherever you get your podcasts.
Welcome back. Now, the Culture Secretary, Lisa Nandy, says that the BBC's charter renewal process will ensure it remains independent and accountable. That, of course, in the wake of the crisis that's hit the corporation in the past week. The outgoing Director General, Tim Davie, today told BBC staff that mistakes had cost them, but they had to fight for their journalism. It comes as the US President Donald Trump is still threatening to sue the corporation for $1 billion over edits that were made to a speech of his in an episode of Panorama. On day 2 or 3 of this story now, here's our arts and entertainment correspondent, Katie Spencer.
This was the first time we'd seen outgoing BBC boss Tim Davies since his resignation, stopping for the cameras on his way into work.
I'm very, very proud of our journalists in this building. They're doing work I think that's incredibly important. I want to thank every one of them. They're doing a wonderful job.
First on his to-do list at New Broadcasting House, a 45-minute video call with staff to try to help his employees understand exactly what's been happening at the BBC, with leaked memos alleging institutional bias and billion-dollar lawsuits from Donald Trump fresh in everyone's thoughts.
I see the weaponisation. I think we've got to fight for our journalism. I'm really proud of our work, and the amazing work locally, globally that we're doing is utterly precious. We have made some mistakes that have cost us, but we need to fight for that, and I'm fiercely proud of that.
Questioned on rumours of an alleged boardroom plot to oust Davey, BBC Chair Samir Shah, who was sat next to him on the call, said he didn't believe in conspiracy theories.
If Shah and Davey were hoping to leave the coup talk at that, it didn't work. I'm told staff who'd submitted questions about the alleged plotter-in-chief, board member Sir Robbie Gibb, became so frustrated that their questions were being vetted and not shown to everyone that out of desperation they started writing their questions into the comment boxes that were public, just to let it be known their concern about political influence at the top.
A screenshot sent to Sky News anonymously showed the comments were pretty scathing. Speaking about the BBC's woes for the first time in the Commons, Culture Secretary Lisa Nandy said this.
Those in this House attacking the BBC from left and right for not expressing views they agree with should consider just what is at stake. There is a fundamental difference between raising serious concerns over editorial failings and members of this House launching a sustained attack on the institution itself. Because the BBC is not just a broadcaster, it is a national institution that belongs to us all.
The clock now ticking down on President Donald Trump's billion-dollar threat to sue the BBC unless he receives a fitting apology by Friday over how Panorama spliced together his January 6th speech. Litigation perhaps to be expected given Trump's history of suing news organisations, having previously settled a defamation case against ABC and a legal dispute with CBS News. Howard Stringer is a former BBC board member and a former president of CBS News.
You should know when you're dealing with a president, as I did, because I had problems with President Reagan and President Nixon, you've got to be very careful with presidents. They have an army of lawyers behind them. So your pursuit of your story, truth and fairness must come first. And if you don't get it right, you'll pay a price.
While everyone at the BBC might be keen to move on, with the clock ticking on Trump's demands and the search for Davies' successor, staff here who are used to reporting the news are having to get used to being the story. Katie Spencer, Sky News.
Well, let's bring back in our duo for this evening, Nick Ferrari and Luke Sullivan. Nick, I mean, what, 48 hours for the BBC. What do you think they're going to actually do this week in relation to Donald Trump?
What they need to do is get out there, and I don't know why the chairman is waiting this long. They have accepted. They say mistakes have been made. You've been in the television business almost as long as I have. That was no mistake. That was a deliberate misedit. Chunks of audio taken 54 minutes apart. That's not a mistake, that's different. And they have fessed up to it. We've had the head of news go, we've had the chief executive, effectively the director general. So they need to make that apology. But let's just say a word, because it shows how schizophrenic this organisation is. Because I made a gag earlier about Traitors. Traitors was an extraordinary success. More than 11 people watched. The most brilliant piece of television. 11 million. Did I say billion? 11 million.
No, you said 11 people. But
sorry, 11. 11 million.
More than 11.
I think it's 11.5 million. And it was brilliantly made television. This is what they do well. And we must also not lose sight of the soft power that they get around the world. This is hugely important. But when you have a situation, and let's be honest, if it was just Donald Trump, I really don't think the DG would have gone. But when you put it on top of the issues with the Arabic Channel, the issues with how Jewish people in this country say they feel they've been treated, the issues with reportedly one desk, the LGBTQ desk, saying we don't want to do these sort of stories, that then builds such a force of water the dam breaks.
Just on the Trump, though, stuff specifically, is what do you feel about the argument that, yes, they made a mistake and they should apologise for it, and as you say, it's pretty basic television, but also, I mean, that they didn't defame Donald Trump. That in the end, they should also go, if you want to see this to court, President Trump, go ahead?
No, because I'm sorry, I can't buy that. And I think what speaks to it is that they knew about this in May, and I do think this often, and you will read this and you will hear this, that normally the BBC's first line of defence is to bury your head in the sand and hope it goes away. And I do think this speaks to it. The Director General knew it, the Chief Executive News knew about it all these months. It's not good enough. And I don't think many British people want to see a fight that could see hundreds of millions of pounds going the way of Donald Trump, and a simple apology for what they admit is wrong is all that's required, and a retraction.
Look, what's also really fascinating about this story, and there's many facets to it, but is Labour's support for the BBC. I mean, you have to remember, Lisa Nandy wasn't calling for anyone to resign on Sunday. They had the full backing of the BBC in terms of institutional bias by Downing Street on Monday. I mean, things would be very different if there was someone else in Downing Street. Or the BBC essentially lucky to have the Labour Party in government.
I think the BBC. I mean, this is one of these stories. I think if you were not following the coverage in the Daily Telegraph and the Mail and some of the other newspapers that had covered this probably would have passed you by. And the first time you turned on the telly on Sunday night and saw Tim Davie and Deborah Turness resign, you probably were wondering what on earth was going on. But I think, to Nick's point, he's very right. Look, I'm a huge supporter of the BBC, but with its unique position also comes huge responsibility. And I think, as the Director General or the Chair of the BBC has made clear, they have failed here, and they've failed repeatedly on a number of issues. Look, it was a wrong edit, but that wasn't the least of the problems. People repeatedly, through their internal processes, raised concerns, and they doubled down on the decision. Now, I think what we need is we need to find a place, and the government has to play its role. And we saw Lisa Nandy in the Commons earlier this afternoon setting out what the government's position is. But actually, the next 18 months, this is going to be one of the big political judgments the government is going to have to make to navigate this situation, which is charter renewal, the future of the BBC in a world in which broadcasting, the way people consume their information, is changing.
It massively is. Nick, everything you could say, what you've said, it could be true, but is it also true? Because I interviewed Peter Bazalgette earlier, of course, former executive. Cool. He says there is a politically concerted campaign to kind of effectively destroy the BBC. Well, do you know why then? His argument would be these stories constantly crop up in the Daily Mail, the Daily Telegraph, the Times, that do have an agenda. Do they not have an agenda against
No, I don't believe they do. I can see why Sir Peter would say that. I don't think they do. The reason we feel it so keenly is that it's almost like the NHS. It's woven into our DNA. I come from a generation, we had Remembrance Day today, and both my parents served, OK? My dad actually said, and that was at a time when you would hear, this is the BBC in London, and it was just ingrained. And we looked to the BBC for motives like Remembrance Day, like the Cenotaph, just this Sunday gone, like the service at the Royal Albert. It is part of our DNA. That is why we care about it so much. So when it goes wrong, as it palpably has here, it has to put it right. It has to realise that responsibility. So Sir Peter, who is a guy I admire immensely, he's made the most amazing television in so far. No, these, if I may use the expression, these cock-ups are on such a scale that it's beyond any political skullduggery.
OK, gentlemen, as always, thank you on that. OK, we're going to take another break here on the Politics Hub. Up next, David Lammy. I mean, that's all I've got to say, really. He's back in the Commons trying to defend these prisoner releases. We'll hear what he had to say and what he plans to do about it after the break. Welcome back to Sky News. Now, the Justice Secretary has revealed 3 wrongfully released prisoners are still at large. As he appeared in Parliament to set up the steps the government is taking to tackle the issues facing prisons. David Lammy, of course, has been under fire for his handling of inmates being let out by mistake, but today sought to put the blame on the Conservatives for cutting prison staff. Our political correspondent Tamara Cohen has the story.
You for him?
I'm not Brahim. A 24-year-old Algerian sex offender released by mistake and located by Sky News and the police 9 days later.
It's not my fault I don't give
In Parliament today, the Justice Secretary revealed he was one of dozens over the past 7 months.
From April to the end of October this year, there were 91 releases in error from prison. We understand that there are 3 mistakenly released prisoners currently lawfully at large. Their prison records show none of these are convicted sex offenders. I have been informed, Mr. Speaker, this afternoon that HMPPS are investigating a further case of a potential release in error on the 3rd of November who may still be at large.
Sharif's release came just days after Hadush Kebatu, an Ethiopian asylum seeker accused of sexually assaulting a teenage girl and a woman, was freed in error in Chelmsford. He was later deported. A 3rd prisoner, William Smith, freed in October by mistake, later handed himself in. The Conservatives demanded to know why he didn't answer questions on this last week.
It's because, like increasing numbers of criminals in our jails, the Justice Secretary just doesn't know whether he's coming or going. The public are being endangered as this circus rumbles on, week after week, with no end in sight. When will he put a stop to it?
Mr. Lammy said he didn't have all the information then and apologised to victims.
I give an unequivocal apology to all who have faced worry or worse as a result of releases in error, especially Hadush Kebatu's victims, who I'm offered to meet.
The Justice Secretary has said prisons are understaffed, underfunded and lost thousands of experienced staff due to cuts under the Conservatives. These high-profile releases are a very visible failure on this government's watch. The Justice Secretary promised £10 million to help prisons improve their systems, but he admitted more wrongful releases may well come to light. Most of those released in error were later tracked down by police, but questions about money, foreign offenders and public safety won't be as quickly shut down. Tamara Cohen, Sky News.
Well, Nick and Luke are still with me. Look, I don't know if you saw David Lammy's face there in that piece to camera by Tamara Cohen. He looks utterly glum. Probably not a surprise.
No. Look, this has not been the government's finest hour last week, and I think if news...
I like that you added last week, as if each week there's not a finest hour.
It's not. And look, I think there's a really serious point, and we were discussing this last week when this news had broken, which is, this is a basic, competence issue of governments. And I think the government have got a fair point to say the system they inherited, but the public rightly hold them to a higher standard. And what they want to see from David Lammy and this government is to get a grip of the system.
Do you think he needs the minister to do it? I mean, there's a lot of criticism of David Lammy that he's kind of not up to the job.
I think that's unfair. I think David is a very talented politician. I think he recognises how serious the issue is, and I think the end of the week and over the weekend will have been difficult. I think there was some criticism of cabinet colleagues sort of bad-mouthing him in the press. I don't think that's a useful way. I think what the public need to see, and I think, frankly, the public won't be that happy when they see Robert Jenrick sort of hurling abuse, because the truth is, this isn't a new problem. There's much more focus on it. That's not good enough, and the government has to get a fix of it.
That's a fair point, though, Nick, isn't it? It's not new. Well, I mean,
it's not.
So
I'll tell you what ties the two stories together. The BBC is the broadcast equivalent of the Home Office. It is too big. The BBC is too big. The Home Office is too big. I think there's a real argument as to why you should break down Border Force, Justice, whatever else. But to your point, look, if a new manager takes over at Manchester United or West Ham, 16, 17 months on, they can't continually blame the defence strategies that were put up. It is not good. When does the point come that Labour will say, well, actually, yeah, this is our complete and utter balls up?
My point on that is that the reason lots of these prisoners have been out accidentally is because there was a rush to have to release prisoners.
But it's their early release scheme, Darren.
Well, but the whole... But at the same time, so the Conservative government were in power for 14 years. They built 500 prison places and our population went up by 7 million.
Yeah, terrible.
So the point is, and you can't build a prison even in a year. So the point, to be fair to this government, is that they've had to release these prisoners areas because there was literally no room left.
I hear you. And during the so-called summer riots in the northwest or the northeast, the number of places left in our jails you could count on the fingers of one hand. That's how parlous the Conservatives left it. We are now 16 months in, and I think these problems that we're witnessing now with Mr. Lammy are as a result of the early release scheme, which clearly has not been put together properly. That's why these people are being let out. That is the reality. And that is on Labour's watch. Remember, it was last week that the strongest ever, the strongest ever measures, close quotes, were going to be... But dear God, if these are the strongest, what are the weakest? What they'll start doing soon is actually Lammy will get up and start saying how many prisoners are still in the jails and aren't on the run. Don't worry.
It'll be a smaller number.
Luckily, we had Sky News ready and were able to go to Finsbury Park and apprehend this guy.
Tom Parmenter finding them. And in saying that, so the government, and this is the fascinating thing I also find about governments, and look, you've seen politics really up close. Is it also really unfair that we blame, and by the way, it maybe bleeds into the BBC story too, that like the buck has to stop with someone, of course it does, but at the same time, if you're a minister with thousands of people beneath you, can you take responsibility when it's human error?
Look, I think you as a minister, the buck does stop with you, and that is why we have the system of democracy we have. And actually, it's one of the refreshing things you can do as a voter is vote one way on the Thursday, and by the Friday morning, the guys are gone. However, I think what David needs to do, like the BBC story, is David needs to use this crisis to get a grip on the situation. There's clearly a huge political focus on this. There's clearly things that he may need from Treasury, from bits of government. It's, there are many sort of flashing signs that this country's not working. This is a really clear, big one. And actually, he's got to use this opportunity to his benefit to fix the system because, if he doesn't, then it will be his fault in, a few years' time when the government face the electorate again.
OK, right, we're going to pause on that for the moment, because I also do want to talk about what's going to come up on a special edition of the UK tonight at 8 o'clock, immediately after this programme. It's going to shine a light, actually, on the crisis in Britain's care system. Here's Sarah J. Mee and our people and politics correspondent Nick Martin, who's been investigating the case of a teenager who took her own life after obvious warnings were ignored.
This special programme tonight, we're here on the site of the first ever children's home in the country. Thomas Coram, who founded it, his statue behind us. And here tonight, we want to explore the issues that you've raised and look forward, because campaigners are saying that we're at a pivotal point now because of a bill that's being drafted, that actually changes can be made that will look after care leavers and stop them from falling off what's called the care cliff.
That's right, and when we talk about the care cliff, we're talking about children reaching the age of 18, when all of that scaffolding around them, social services, health, it often just falls away, and it can be brutal and it can be sudden. And that care cliff puts a lot of children, vulnerable children, in a very, very tricky situation. It can be very stressful for them. It's really, journalists like me often talk about systems being broken. We must go beyond talking about systems being broken and try to explore what the solutions are. And that's one of the reasons why we've come here tonight, to gather around a group of care experienced people, young and old, who are now taking this fight, in their words, to Parliament to say, there is legislation going through Parliament at the moment, the Children's Wellbeing in Schools Bill, which has within it the potential, they say, to improve the system, which could save the lives of people like Nanita. It's not going to be easy, but tonight we'll hear from a broad range of people in one room who have ideas about what the government can do to firm up the law. The question, Sarah Jane, is whether the government listened to it.
And, of course, you can join Sarah Jane and, indeed, Nick Martin on that special edition of UK Tonight, 8 p.m. here on Sky News. Now, the Prime Minister has given perhaps his strongest hit yet that the two-child benefit cap will be scrapped in the upcoming budget. Speaking on Lorraine, Keir Starmer said the government is taking steps to bring down child poverty.
I can look you in the eye and tell you I'm personally committed to driving down child poverty.
Will that involve getting rid of the two-child benefit?
You won't have to wait much longer, but I wouldn't be telling you that we're going to drive down child poverty if I wasn't clear that we will be taking a number of measures in order to do so.
Well, that wasn't the Prime Minister speaking to Lorraine Kelly, but on the Lorraine Kelly programme, Nick Ferrari and Luke Sullivan are here. I mean, this is... I don't think we need to even guess about this one, do we? They are going to scrap this two-child benefit cap, aren't they?
It seems very much like that. We've had this today from the Prime Minister, and I think yesterday Rachel Reeves gave a really clear hint that, you know, the two-child limit is going to go. And, you know, Labour MPs are going to be very, very happy. Well, I think on the Labour side it will be, and this has been a big issue in terms of Labour MPs' concerns. You know, they go into politics because they want to improve people's lives, and this has been a totemic policy that the Labour Party has campaigned against. I think the problem with this is, at a time when the government's going to be making some really hard tax choices, actually, as pernicious a policy as this was, there was some very interesting politics behind it from George Osborne and David Cameron, if people remember.
And also public support, as you said. Nick?
Well, I think we're going to have an absolute eye-watering budget, aren't we? Because as we come towards the end of this edition of your show, we were talking about WASPI women at the start, and that cost, as I recall, was something like 10 billion.
10.5 billion.
10.5, thank you. I don't know what the cost is. Well, all this money has to be found. So, OK, so we've just spent, in the course of this hour, we're not even through the hour yet, we spent somewhere in the region of 14 billion pounds. That has to be found in a couple of weeks' time. Yeah, eyes down for a really, really tough budget. That's the only way it's going to go down.
What do you think about the argument, though, that essentially it will lift children out of poverty? And if a Labour Party is about anything, it should be about that.
If a Labour Party is about anything, it should be getting people back into work. The Labour Party would be celebrating the fact that more people have been put out into work. Sadly, we learnt today that, unfortunately, employment is going up, wage growth has stalled, growth generally has stalled. I think they should be looking at policies that get growth going, and then when you can do that, you can start having more largesse. I'm really concerned about what this budget... And presumably, you will know better than I, there may be a trade-off, that there are going to be some taxes and gone.
Yeah, and I mean, like, my criticism of this would have been that we had a huge welfare reform package in the summer that got voted down. Actually, what I think the government should have done was look at the two-child benefit, but have a package that could have got through and actually reformed the system as a whole. I think that would have actually got through Parliament if, with Labour MPs, if they'd been voting to get rid of the two-child benefit, but also look at changes to some of the welfare reform.
Like a sweetener, effectively.
And I think they made a mistake there. And frankly, I think, you can look at the cost of that failed package. It was about £6 billion. This is going to cost about £3.5 billion. We're as Nick's got his ready reckoner, that was, £10 billion is a huge sums of money.
Just very finally, though, on this, because there is an argument about lifting children out of poverty, and that's an argument that Gordon Brown and others have certainly made. Nick, just briefly on this, there's also a point for politicians on the right elsewhere in the world concerned about demographic decline. I think in this country last year, literally there was no migration, or population would not have increased at all. Some schools are closing down in London and elsewhere. And governments like Viktor Orban's and others, or Giorgia Meloni in Italy, giving people money to have more kids. If this incentivises people to have more children, is that there?
As long as we've got the hospitals, I hear what you say about the schools, as long as we've got the housing, as long as we've got the jobs, and that would give me concern, because if you look at some of the infrastructure, I hear what you say about schools, and I find that extraordinary, particularly in London, by the way. Schools actually close. But as long as we've got all the other things, yes, obviously that is a good thing, but I wonder whether we can cope with it all.
OK, gentlemen, for the moment, thank you, because we're going to take one last break here on the Politics Hub. Up next, we're talking about penguins. Yes, you heard me right, because MPs are trying to free the 15 in London's aquarium. We will be explaining all, I promise, in just a matter of minutes. Stay tuned.
Mr. Trump, James Matthews from Sky News.
Hey, James.
I'm James Matthews, and I'm Sky's US correspondent, based here in Washington, D.C. Mr. President, what will you see next to Benjamin Netanyahu? In June 2009, did you stay at the apartment in Manhattan of Jeffrey Epstein?
I'm not answering any questions about him.
I'm Martha Kellner and I'm Sky's US correspondent. I've interviewed some of America's most recognisable politicians. Should the Defence Secretary and the Vice...
Wait, what country are you
from? The UK.
Okay, we don't give a crap about your opinion and your reporting.
Mr Walker, you're anti-abortion, but 2 women say that you paid for their abortions. Are you a hypocrite, sir?
Connor, what did you say to the president? What did you say?
We had a great meeting. He was a great man.
I'm David Blevins, one of Sky's US correspondents based in Washington, D.C.
David Blevins from Sky News. Fire chiefs say that they're really stretched to the limit and running out of water. What have you got to say to that?
I've witnessed the remarkable passion for politics here.
Why only in America? Why is this American exceptionalism? I just want to understand why you do not think that guns are the problem.
Why is this just an American problem?
The anger too, and the division.
Where are you from? From Sky News, UK.
Yeah.
Back up.
Mr Navarro, can
I'm allowed to ask questions, aren't I?
I'm Mark Stone and I'm Sky's US correspondent based here in Washington, D.C.
Vladimir Putin calls you outstanding, Mr Musk. Has your ego and ignorance cost Ukrainian lives?
David Cameron needs to worry about his own country, and frankly, he can kiss my ass.
Mr Patel, did you endanger public safety when you said the killer was in custody?
Free wherever you get your news.
What words do you have for Harry Dunn's family today?
Have a nice day.
Do you fear a 4th indictment?
I'll tell you on another day on the podcast what that was all about.
Welcome to the world.
Come along for the journey. It'll be fun.
Russia knows our weaknesses, but do you? This is the war game.
There were a number of armed security.
We want to discover, to find out what's really going on.
Everything you need to know about British politics in about 20 minutes. I actually don't like political drama.
So, where next?
Available wherever you get your podcasts.
Welcome back to the Politics Hub, or should I say the Penguins Hub? Because I do want to talk to you about penguins, rather unusually. Why? Because a group of some 75 MPs have joined a campaign calling for the release of 15 penguins from an aquarium in central London. They say that the animals are trapped in a basement. Oh, look how cute they are. They're in a basement without sunlight or fresh air and have called their captivity at the Sea Life London Aquarium un-British. And they've asked the Environment Secretary to consider whether the penguins should be freed. Free the 15 is the call that we've heard. We have heard from Merlin Entertainments, that's the company that owns the aquarium. They've responded to all of this, saying that we know that many people care deeply about the getting to penguins at Sea Life London Aquarium. We do too. We have an incredible team of conservationists, of animal welfare specialists and aquarists who are with the penguins every day, making sure that they are healthy and thriving. And we don't do this alone. We work with some of the best penguin experts in the world, including vets and specialists in penguin behaviour and habitat design. Now, this is a story that Nick Froy has been very desperate to talk about all evening.
Indeed.
The penguins are very, very cute. Well, and this is a story about alleged animal cruelty.
Yes.
What do you think of the campaign to free the 15?
I was the first news editor at Sky News 37 years ago. Martin Brunt was there, John Craig came a few later. If you're talking about working in a basement with no sunlight and no fresh air, that was Sky News when this channel started. And no one complained about me and Martin Brunt. Clearly,
well, John
it's no
Craig
longer...
still looks like he's in pretty good fettle, to be fair. So I don't think he needs to be freed.
Clearly, it's no longer pick up a penguin, it's for free a penguin. You were nervous what I was going to say there. It's for free a penguin.
Very good.
Yeah, so I know. Toiling without any daylight and fresh air is pretty brutal. We need to free the penguins.
Look, maybe we should just move these penguins to Wandsworth Prison, and they'll be out immediately.
I don't think the government needs any other problems with incarcerating animals at the moment, yes.
That would be great to see David Lammy give an announcement about the penguins.
We accidentally released them, we're sorry.
That's right.
Just on a side note, what's your feeling about, the call is always for the Secretary of State, politicians to intervene?
I mean, I think, this is obviously... a story that politicians got involved in. But, we've talked about some really big issues.
Yep.
And I think there is sometimes, as a post-bag issue, animal welfare stories are always really big. And this has got some sort of, I think there's some read across to the alpaca Geronimo that was shot because it had TB.
I can beat that. Blackie the donkey. Who remembers Blackie the donkey? The donkey that had to be freed, and the Sun newspaper was in a brutal war with the Daily Star and the Mirror. Who would get to the donkey first? And the Sun won. It was the Sun what won. I go all the way back to Blackie the donkey. That's how far I go. We love an animal story.
Yeah, British public love animals, and I think there's no, it's understandable.
Why this is on British, if you like.
Well, it is. I mean, we're laughing about it, but in reality, a lot of viewers now will quietly think, well, this is... I think Chris Packham has been...
He's been campaigning hard.
This is animal... I hear what Merlin say, I understand, but it would appear, on face value, to be a case of animal cruelty. Taking on board what Merlin say.
OK, well...
I'm going to waddle off. I'm going to waddle off.
No one ever said this is not an eclectic programme. Nick, Luke, as always, a pleasure. Thank you very much indeed. That is it for Politics Up for tonight. Of course, we're back at 7 tomorrow. Do join me then, if you can. Up next, it's that special edition of the UK Tonight with Sarah Jane and with Nick Martin. Do stay tuned for that. I'll see you tomorrow. Goodbye.